so in this chapter, we're going to talk about biotechnology or genetic engineering, a little bit of application of all of the genetic concepts that we've been talking about in the previous chapters. And one of the techniques we'll talk about is electrophoresis, which this Amoeba Sisters diagram is showing you an example of. But before we get into new technology, I want to speak very briefly about cloning, just to make sure you have a general understanding of what cloning can do and what cloning cannot do. So the first animal that was cloned from an adult cell was Dolly the sheep in 1996. And what they did, they used a technique called nuclear transfer. So what they did was they took an adult sheep cell and they took out the nucleus. Remember, that would be all of the DNA. And then they took that nucleus and they put it into an empty sheep egg cell. So they removed the DNA that was already in the egg cell, they put this nucleus in. Now, that DNA would technically be programmed to be, in this case, an udder cell, or a skin cell, or an intestine cell, whatever kind of cell they got it from. It would have all the chromosomes, but the DNA would be selectively turned on and off to specialize that cell for whatever its job was. So the next thing that they did was they hit it with an electric spark. And that electric shock sort of tricked the DNA into thinking this was a fertilized egg. So it kind of flipped all those switches back on again on all those other chromosomes that were dormant. And then this would then start dividing. And when it became a ball of cells or an embryo, then they would implant that into a surrogate mother sheep who would carry the baby to term and give birth. And ultimately, this is how they got Dolly the sheep. And Dolly the sheep lived, I think, 6 years or so. She ended up dying of pneumonia, but you can go see her. Her remains are still on display at the National Museum of Scotland because of how famous it was that they were able to do this. So here's a picture of the technique. The microneedle, as you can see, they pull out the nucleus that was in the egg, and they put in the nucleus of the sheep they want to clone. Then all the DNA is going to come from the donor, put that into a surrogate mother, and then you end up with the cloned sheep. So this technique has been perfected. They still use it today. You can actually get your dog or cat cloned. There's companies that'll do that. And this guy, Adolfo Cambiaso, he is a famous polo rider, and he has cloned his horses. So he's got these prize-winning horses, and he's basically, his whole team of polo horses are all clones. And over 200 horses have been cloned since 2011. And, he believes that this has kind of given him an edge, given him a winning team. And, of course, there are some questions about nature versus nurture. You know, if you clone me, are you going to get, 50 years from now, are they going to be just like I am today? Or are they, how much of my upbringing and my experiences have shaped the kind of person I am? What's genetic and what's, not genetic? Also, cloning isn't going to fix problems. Like, if we try to save the Florida panther, which is endangered, by cloning some panthers, the Florida panthers today, a lot of them have genetic defects because they've been inbreeding because there's so few of them. So if I clone an organism that's already got problems, the clone's going to have problems too. And that's why we're going to be talking about these newer techniques, like how do we fix problems, How can we create an organism that's cured of diseases, and how do they make GMOs and some of that kind of stuff. And so that's what we're about to go in here. But baby steps, the first thing we need to talk about is how do we get DNA in the first place? How do we cut out a gene that we're interested in? So it turns out that bacteria have these enzymes on their own already, and it's sort of like their immune system. These enzymes are designed to chop up DNA from viruses, and these are called restriction enzymes, and they cut DNA at specific sequences. So whenever they happen to see one of these target sequences in a viral DNA that's been inserted into them, it'll basically cut that DNA up. So if I take a recipe but I chop it all up, now you can't read the recipe anymore. And so this is a way that they protect themselves from bacteriophages or viruses that infect bacteria. So we've discovered these enzymes, and we use them for DNA fingerprinting and other applications that I'll show you in the next couple of slides. Now, the names for these, you don't have to know this for our test, but I just wanted you to know when you see these weird names, They are named after the species that the enzyme came from. So most of you have heard of E. coli. So EcoR1 is a very famous restriction enzyme. The ECO comes from E. coli, strain RY, so there's the R, and it was the first enzyme from that species, and so there's the 1. So that's how they name these different restriction enzymes that they've discovered. Now, restriction enzymes, they don't just randomly chop up DNA. They only cut the DNA when they find a target sequence. And it's very important these target sequences have to be palindromic. So in the English language, you may have heard of palindromes. A palindrome is a word in the English language that's the same forwards and backwards. So for example, race car. Forwards, it's race car. Backwards, it's also race car. But a palindromic sequence in DNA is not exactly the same. You'll notice that GAATTC backwards is not GAATTC. So this is where you have to remember that DNA is typically read 5' to 3'. So a palindromic sequence in DNA is where when you read it 5' to 3' on each side, you have the same sequence. So it's a palindrome in that sense. So you'll notice here, GAATTC, when I read it the opposite direction on the other side, it's GAATTC. And that would be the recognition site, so that's where the enzyme would bind, and then the enzyme would cut the DNA. Now, it could make 2 different kinds of cuts. A straight through cut will leave what's called blunt ends, so it cuts straight through the middle, and it kind of cuts the piece in half. The other option is it makes what's called a staggered cut, and that will leave what we call sticky ends. Now, both of these are useful, but they're used for different things. Blunt ends are usually used for things like DNA fingerprinting. In other words, if I just want to analyze your DNA and compare it to a crime scene or compare it to somebody for ancestry purposes, all I want to do is cut it. I don't want to stick it back together. Blunt ends are perfect. But if I'm trying to, say, create a GMO, if I want to stick a jellyfish gene for glowing into the DNA of a tetra, a fish, to make glowfish, I need sticky ends. I need to be able to stick DNA back together again to create this transgenic organism or this genetically engineered DNA. So they have different purposes. So this is a picture. So if we look at EcoR1, this is the cut sequence. This is called the recognition sequence. And then the dashes here, this shows where it will cut. And if we come down here, you'll see that this one is going to give us sticky ends. So this would be a DNA segment. This would be connected like this. This is, imagine that this is our DNA. It cuts specifically at the G here and then at the G here. And then when you cut it here and here, because all that's holding this together in the middle is hydrogen bonds, this will break. These are called sticky ends. I could technically stick any gene I want here. As long as I've cut it with the same enzyme, it will have complementary sticky ends. And then I'll use ligase, the glue. Remember we talked about ligase in the last chapter, and I can seal these back together. So I could stick a gene to make human insulin into a bacteria, or a gene to glow into a fish, or whatever. This is blunt ends. See, so this one, SMA1, it cuts at CCCGGG, that's the recognition site, and then it cuts right there between the C and the G, and you see how this one makes a straight cut, so these cannot be spliced back together again. And again, we're assuming that these are palindromic sequences, so when you read it 5'3", it's the same sequence in both directions. Okay, so this is actually a sample problem. So before we start the sample problem, just a reminder that this is supposed to be a DNA that's connected. So here, this is A to T, G to C, C to G, etc. So this is like this. They're just not drawing the sugars and the phosphates, and they're not showing the connection, but this is one DNA strand, not 2 separate things. This is one DNA strand that looks like this, and this one happens to be exactly 50 base pairs long. So just a heads up, I wouldn't want you to misinterpret what you're looking at. Okay, so we have 3 separate enzymes, HEN2, HEY3, and BAMH1. So each of these has a different recognition site. So I'm going to just run through these very quickly. So the first one, GTCGAC, is the recognition site, and it's going to cut right in the middle. You'll notice if it's the same number of letters on each side of the cut, it's going to be blunt ends. Just a heads up on that. Like, so I can already tell that BAM H1 is going to be the one that's going to give me sticky ends because the cut is off to the side of the recognition sequence. So just that's a little shortcut there. Okay, so I'm looking for Hindi 1. This is GTC GAC. So if I scroll through here, I find it one time. GTC GAC. It's got to be all 6 letters, not 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom, all 6 in a row, reading it this way. Now if I read the other side, 5-3, notice it's a palindrome. So this is my recognition site, and then my cut would be right here in the middle. It cuts between the C and the G on each side. So this would do this. Basically, you have now a piece of DNA here and a piece of DNA over here. So it made one cut. I would end up with 2 pieces. Now, for the size of the pieces, I wouldn't really ask you this on a test. It would, might be a little too time consuming, but you could count. This is a base. Each of these is a base pair, and it turns out this one gives me 25 and 25. So this one literally cuts it in half. I have 2 pieces, and each one is 25 base pairs long. Now let's look at my second one. I'm going to erase my work here because it's getting a little sloppy. Okay, so let's look at the second one. So our second one, Hey 3, it cuts at CCGG. Again, we have to look for all 4 letters in a row on each side. So if I start here, 5-3, here it is, CCGG, and that is actually the only place I find it. I see CC in some places, like here. Here's another CC, but I don't see CCGG, all 4 letters in a row. On the other side, I read it 5-3 the other way, and you'll see it's palindromic CCGG, and it's going to cut right in the middle, right here. So again, this whole piece was 50 base pairs long, so this made one cut. That gives me 2 pieces. This is the first piece, and then this whole thing is the second piece. And what would the size be? Well, this is only 5 base pairs long. That means that the rest of this must be 45 base pairs long. Remember, I'm just cutting the same 50 base pair piece into different sized pieces. It's always got to be 50 base pairs. I'm not deleting DNA or adding DNA or anything like that. So remember, this was one cut with 2 pieces, and in this case, they were 25 and 25. All right, I'm going to add back in my first cut because now they want to know, what if I cut with both enzymes? So I put this in a tube, I cut it with both enzymes. So this was my cut with Hey 3, and going back, my cut with Hind 2 was right here. It was GTC GAC. I'm just going to redraw that in. So this time, I'm going to get 2 cuts, right? And I'm going to have 3 pieces. This piece, which is 5 base pairs long. I'm going to have this piece. And it's not too hard to figure out how big this would be because I remember this was 25. The whole thing is 50. And this was also 25 on the left, but now the 5 has been cut off of it, so this would be 20. So a 5, a 20, and a 25. Okay? So you need to make sure you understand how to find a cut site, how to make these cuts, and how to figure out how big the pieces are. Now keep in mind, we haven't talked about it yet, but you couldn't just see these pieces, right? These would just be a pile of DNA in a test tube, in a liquid. They're too small to see. So the next thing we're going to talk about is a technique of how would we separate the pieces so we could see how many pieces we have. All right, last one, BAM H1. So BAM H1 is going to give me sticky ends. So that's the answer to that question. And it actually cuts in 2 places. So CCTAGG, that's here, CCTAGG, and the other way. And then it's also over here, CCTAGG, here. Now this one cuts between the G's, and it's important. This is going to look a little different. It's going to cut here, and then it's going to cut here, because it's reading this way, and then this will just break. So it'll look like this. It makes what's called a staggered cut. We are going to get 3 pieces here. This is piece 1. This is piece 2, this is 3. If I was interested in, say, cutting out a gene, let's say this was an important gene in here, this would be perfect. I would now have sticky ends on both sides, and I could seal this with ligase into some other DNA that I cut with the same enzyme. So this made 2, and it gave me 3 pieces. All right, last thing, bacteria. So bacteria are circular. If I make one cut, I'm still only going to have 1 piece. If I make 2 cuts, this would be 1, 2, I'm going to have 2 pieces. So it behaves a little bit differently than a straight line DNA.